Hello. Some announcements. My latest short film, Spider, premiered at the Motor City Nightmares Film Festival this past July and has a few screenings this September. This Friday, which happens to be Friday the 13th, you can catch Spider in Birmingham, Michigan at the Royal Star Film Festival and in Kansas City for the KC Underground Film Festival. Also, there will be three screenings of Spider the weekend of the 27th through the 29th. You'll be able to see Spider at the Hell's Half Mile Film and Music Festival in Bay City, Michigan, the Chicago Horror Film Festival in the Windy City, and the Festival of Darkness at the historic Redford Theater in Detroit. It is officially Spider September. Okay, horror fans, do you like monsters, gore, and behind-the-scenes looks at your favorite horror films? Then be sure to check out Fangoria, one of the premier brands in horror. Fangoria has been delivering quality magazines since 1979. Each collectible issue features exclusive articles about your favorite monsters, as well as up-and-coming terrors. A Fangoria subscription gets you the ultimate horror experience. I'm talking 4 quarterly issues, each 100 pages with subscriber-exclusive covers. You'll get early access to products and giveaways, gift codes, private community access, and more gruesome goodies. Be sure to check out the Fangoria store website for subscriptions and a bunch of cool merch. And while you're there, use promo code WoodYouDieShow for 20% off your entire order. That's right, 20% off your entire order. Applies to subscription and one-time orders, applies to the first subscription order only. Now it's time to return to Oz.
Death has come to your little town, Sheriff.
Have you ever felt a knife cut through human flesh and scrape the bone beneath?
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
Be my victim.
You are all my children now.
Hello, my name is Austin Torres, and welcome to the Would You Die podcast, the show where we talk about our favorite horror monsters and villains. Today, returning to the podcast is comic book writer, sleep researcher, and my friend, Dillon Gilbertson. How are you doing today?
Hey, I'm so excited. I'm jazzed. I've got a lot of good, positive, high energy today. I'm excited. We did a lot of work on the Kickstarter today. We dropped a lot of prices for a lot of our rewards, and I think people are going to be super jazzed about it. I got to watch one of my favorite movies of all time today that we're going to talk about, Return to Oz, and so yeah, things could barely be better.
I love it. I'm so excited. So people who have been listening to this show a long time, Dillon Gilbertson is a returning guest. On our first episode together, we talked about The Monster Squad.
Yeah.
And
Monster Squad is my number one favorite movie, and so this is a dream come true for me. I couldn't imagine anything better than getting to talk about two of my favorite movies of all time for work. Like, this is great. Fun fact: when I was a kid, Monster Squad I watched religiously every day almost, but Return to Oz was actually on the same VHS tape because it was a recorded one, and we had recorded both of the movies on the same VHS. And so, like, after Monster Squad, sometimes I'm a lazy kid, like I'm 6-7 years old, like, let's just chill and keep watching. Let's just watch Return to Oz right after Monster Squad. So this is a spiritual I don't know, full circle kind of, I guess.
yeah,
maybe? Yeah, we'll call it that.
and it's one hell of a double feature too.
Yeah. They're both kids movies. I would say Monster Squad, being about monsters, is actually more kid friendly than Return to Oz.
You know, that's an interesting point. Because
Return to
I
Oz is
yeah.
Oz. Everybody thinks of Wizard of Oz as like very kid friendly, but yeah, the books and the Return to Oz movie are they're pretty dark. They're pretty gruesome.
Yeah, and I feel like, well, it's hard to say because me personally, I've never seen the movie until the day of this recording.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna approach it differently than someone who got to see it as a kid, but it reminded me of like a lot of fantasy films that I got to see as a kid, like The Never-Ending Story.
Yeah. Yep.
I remember
Also
that
got
one
some-
being dark. Yeah.
Yeah, that one's got some traumatizing bits to it as well. Everybody remembers the Swamp of Sadness and the horse. Yeah, Artek's Die in the Swamp of Sadness. Spoilers for Neverending Story. There's another movie that I almost chose called The Hug-a-Bunch. Have you heard of this film?
No.
It's pure nightmare fuel. It's crazy. But I was talking with my sister. Shout out to my sister Sherry, who's very supportive of all my work, and she's the best, biggest sister I could ever ask for. But I almost asked for Hug a Bunch just so that we could talk about one of her favorite movies. But anyway, yeah, the Return to Oz is it's got a lot of weird stuff that's just seems like conceptually is not okay for kids.
Yeah, and before we started recording, you were kind of saying how there was a controversy when it came out. Like a lot, I guess a lot of parents are like, adult groups were like, "Yo, this is too scary for kids. This is not for
Yeah,
kids."
yeah, like it's a movie that it, it almost tries it's trying to please everybody, but ended up at the time of release, I wasn't alive when it was released.
Mhm.
But at the time of release pleased almost nobody, right? Except for diehard older fans of the books. Because like kids were too scared by it. The parents who weren't super fans of the books also thought it was too traumatizing for children. The people, because it's a canonical sequel to the first movie.
Yeah,
And now that you've seen both of them, like you know that they are wildly different kinds of movies, right? And so the people who loved the first movie were very put off by the second one because of how weird it was. But like there's very few plot holes between the two films. Like story-wise, they match up pretty good, and they made sure of that because it's a canonical sequel. But then they also included all the stuff from the books, including the darker tones and like I don't know. I think they did a masterful job, but I don't know, audiences, especially at the time, didn't seem to think so.
it's interesting because I'm not like the biggest fan of the world of Oz. I don't really know much about it other than I've seen the the 1939 Judy Garland classic a bunch
Mhm.
of times. So I'm familiar with that. And you said how like these films like are very different. And the first thing I noticed is Return to Oz is not a musical.
No, not in the least. No, yeah, yeah, yeah.
I,
That's the number one difference, I would say.
I was like 40 minutes in before I was like,
Where are the
when are they going to
songs?
start singing? Like, what the hell?
Yeah. Yeah, no. Yep, that's right. Um, yeah, that's yeah, yeah. I think the two other biggest differences, I think, other than the fact that the second one is super dark, is that the designs of the Cowardly Lion and the Tin Man and the Scarecrow
Mhm.
are different, but they're more accurate to the books. Like if you ever look at the books, they have like hand drawings either from Baum or from other people who took a hand in illustrating it. Like the Tin Man doesn't look like the Tin Man in the first Wizard of Oz movie, but the one in Return of Oz looks is a dead ringer for the sketches in the books. Same thing with the Scarecrow and the Cowardly Lion. That everything is more book accurate, which again like put a lot of people off, which is strange to think about now because a lot of people will throw a big huff if like things are not book accurate, right?
Right.
But Return to Oz missed that. Like people were mad because it was darker than the 1939 one.
I think it's interesting because I feel like the 1939 Wizard of Oz became much bigger in terms of like popular culture than the books.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
Oh, yeah, for sure.
I feel like a lot of people don't know there are Wizard of Oz books.
Yeah. 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 I think the 1939 Wizard of Oz, I could be mistaken, but I think was the first movie to use Technicolor. And so it was a
Oh, it
big
might
deal.
be.
Yeah, and so the slippers, the ruby slippers from the movie, in the books, they are not ruby slippers. I think they're silver slippers. But like when you're using Technicolor, they're like, that's not flashy enough. Like, let's
Right.
use this and make them red. And so they made it pop a lot more. That makes it look great. And so that's another thing that carried over into Return to Oz. Because you'll see at the end that the Gnome King has the ruby slippers. I think in the book version, the Gnome King actually shredded the slippers, the silver slippers, and then used the rubies to make a belt or something like that. Yeah,
Mm.
so the ruby slippers carried over a lot of things from the movie in culture and just in the zeitgeist, sort of very much replaced book book story, I guess. Kind of the way that Frankenstein never had bolts in his neck. That was never a thing in the book.
Right.
But like because it was that way in the movie, like he's got bolts in his neck now.
And like he's very intelligent and can speak kind of
Yeah.
eloquently in the
Yeah,
book.
he's super well spoken in the books, but in the movie he's just like "Brr."
Right. And then like it's not until the sequel Bride of Frankenstein where he actually gets to talk. And
Oh.
even then it's like smoke good. We
Yeah.
belong dead. And I love Bride of Frankenstein, but I feel like Bride of Frankenstein is a bit more accurate to the book than Frankenstein is.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. And this to say too, like I've never understood people who got super mad when like a movie was so different from a book. As long as the movie's good, like it's good. Like
Oh yeah.
the Wizard of Oz and Frankenstein are both great examples of that. The first Wizard of Oz movie is wildly different from the book, and Frankenstein as well. Like they're very different. And I always come up I take this point with 1989 Batman as well.
Mhm.
Like the fact that Joker killed Batman's parents, like that was never a thing in the comics, at least not at the time. And like nobody threw a fuss about it. Like there weren't because we didn't have the internet back then, I guess.
Right.
And so there weren't droves of people who were like, oh, how could you do this? Like this isn't real. This isn't the way it is. Like it worked and it was great and it's a fantastic movie. And even comic book fans today who would otherwise make that complaint agree that 89 Batman is a fantastic film.
And like to prove your point even more, my favorite movie of all time is Jurassic Park.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Oh yeah.
that movie
Another
couldn't
one
be even
wildly
more
different.
different.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
they're both great pieces of art, but I think Steven Spielberg made the right choice into kind of bringing in a lot more fantasy and adventure elements as opposed to the cold science fiction horror that is that book.
Yeah, definitely.
While we're in the world of Oz, this is going to sound like a tangent, but I promise it fits in the context of the conversation. It's like a half
Sure,
tangent, a half gent.
sure. You're
Have you ever seen Bravo's 100 Scariest Movie Moments?
I think that was a show for a while, right? It was like a mini series and they was it separated into different chunks? Like on one episode they would do like 1 through 20 and then the next episode they would do
Yeah,
like
and they had like
21. I think
horror
I don't
filmmakers and
yeah,
celebrities
I don't
talking
yeah, I
about
remember I
movies.
remember Eli Roth on there talking about a lot of different movies, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah, I remember I've seen some of them. I don't know if I've seen the entire list, but I have seen some of it to answer the question. Yeah.
that was like one of the most life-changing TV shows for me when like I was 10.
Yeah.
And that was big for me because I saw a lot of shit probably shouldn't have seen at that age and it was awesome. But they had
Same.
the Wizard of Oz, like the
Oh, no
original
kidding.
Wizard of Oz
Really?
on that list. They had some like movies that you wouldn't quite expect, but you're like, yeah, that's pretty scary. Like
Yeah.
the original Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory.
Oh my God. Yeah, the tunnel scene,
That
nobody,
was the
yeah.
scene.
Yeah. Yeah, the tunnel scene's objectively terrifying.
And I think with the original 1939 Wizard of Oz film and like Jurassic Park, for example, I think a lot of people forget that these movies are at the very least horror adjacent with very
Yeah, oh
scary
yeah,
scenes.
definitely. Yeah, for sure.
And but we remember like, the Brachiosaur scene or the um
Yeah,
skipping down the yellow brick road singing we're off to
yeah,
see the
yeah,
wizard, like we
yeah,
remember that and
yeah,
we
yeah,
forget about the fucking Wicked Witch of the West being nightmare fuel and we're
yeah,
flying
yep,
monkeys.
yep. Yeah, I'm gonna probably come back to this point a few times as we talk about the movie. The Return to Oz is a movie that I think maybe because of my familiarity with Wizard of Oz and just because of how many times I've seen it, Return to Oz, like is clearly to me a movie made by people who gave a shit. Like
Yeah.
the people who made this movie cared deeply about it. And like you can tell like there are references back and forth between the beginning and the ends of the movie. There are references to the books, there are references to the original film. Like everything is laid out so well. And I think to their credit, the first several scripts of Return to Oz were really dark. And I mean, it's still very dark. And the reason for that is like Disney told the scriptwriter too, like, this is too dark. We need to lighten things up, like add jokes, like make it lighter. And so he relented and like brought let some writers work the script out a little bit and make it lighter. But guess what? None of their shit made it into the movie. Like they're like, yeah, this stuff is good. We'll let you write it and stuff. And then they didn't even put it in the movie because the books themselves are dark. They're not horror books, but like they're just weird. And
Yeah.
like like all the Princess Mombi, who is a woman without a head who decapitates other people to wear their head. That's in the books. That's real shit. And so they're like, yeah, you write your fun jokes and stuff, but like we're actually not going to use it and we're going to stick to the original, the source material and stuff on this. And so like I love that about it. It's so cool.
I like that character a lot. I never knew of that character, and I was like,
Mhm.
dang.
Yeah, yeah. She's so scary too. Like when she pops out of the bed and like her head is screaming from the other room, she's like, Dorothy girl. And, like that haunted me for a while. That's just her voice was so scary to me when I was a kid.
I can imagine, growing up and being scared by it. As someone who is 29 and I'm about to turn 30 actually in about a month. I did not get
Happy
scared
early
by this
birthday.
movie. Oh, thank you.
Yeah,
But I did not get scared by this movie, but I'm watching it and I was like, "Oh, this would have terrified me had I watched this as a kid."
yeah.
It
Yeah.
100% deserves a spot on my podcast.
Yes. Good. I hope you were going to agree with me because I think I requested this movie and I was like he has to. Like when he sees it, he has to agree. But then as time went on, I was like, man, I really hope he agrees. But like it just has to. Like it's a horror film. It's more a horror film than Monster Squad. Somehow, a movie about monsters is
I agree with
less
that because
horror.
Monster Squad has more comedy.
Yeah, that's I as much as Monster Squad's my favorite movie, if they would have added more jokes to Wizard of Oz or Return to Oz, it might have ended up more like Monster Squad.
Right, right. And like on this show, I've stretched it a bit to talk about things I want to talk about. Like I've covered Indiana Jones, I've covered Star Wars, I've covered Lord of the Rings, all which have horror elements. I would say Return of
Yeah.
Oz has more horror elements than all of them, except for
Nice.
maybe Temple of Doom.
Good. Yeah. Temple of Doom. Yeah, that's fair. I'll accept that. Um, yeah, and I was glad that we could do another one of these movies that are ostensibly for children but are too dark sometimes, or they ride this really thin line of two kids for adult and two adult for kids, because that's kind of what we tried to do with My Neighbor Necromancer. We have conversations all the time about like, should we add blood here? It's like, no blood. Should we do this? Like, no, that's too scary. Or what about if we do this? Like, no, that's not scary enough. And so like we have to always trying to make it one of those properties, right?
Yeah.
A property that doesn't talk down to kids, but isn't going to be too heady for kids to understand or be entertained by.
Yeah, and I think that's important because I'm going to speak primarily on movies because that's more what I know.
Sure.
I don't know if it's true for all media forms at the moment, but I feel like there's not a lot of movies for kids that
You mean like,
like
well, I
actually
mean like,
treat them as people. It's
oh
either
yeah,
like it's either movies that like have no stakes and like
yeah, like Minions.
right, or it's more like I guess you could see the Avengers, like that's PG-13, like
Yeah, I mean kids. That's just kids like loud noises and superheroes, I guess. But like no one, the kids aren't gonna like understand the plot of what is it, the Winter Soldier, right? They're not gonna understand
right.
like these political maneuverings and stuff like that. Like they're not gonna get that. I think there are a few. I think I agree that there's kids movies that are just like, I don't want to say empty, but movies that are just for bright colors. And then
Right.
there are the movies too that are like the Winter Soldier. Like, yeah, kids can see them and they'll probably enjoy it, but there's a lot going on there that is maybe not for them. I think there's a few movies that might do a good job, like Inside Out. Like Inside
Okay,
Out's
yeah.
great. Yeah, like that one like talks about emotions in a way I think that kids can sort of digest and help them better understand their emotions and stuff, which I think is great and important. But to your point, like that's Inside Out. Like not every movie is that
Right.
good or has that kind of depth that speaks from a level that kids can respect, I guess.
And even then, there's not even that many like bright colored take the 5-year-olds to go see, like there's the Super Mario movie, which like
Yeah.
it's fun,
Yeah, it was good. I liked it.
but like it's that, the Minions, Inside Out. What else is the
Yeah.
Garfield movie, I guess? Like it
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm having a really hard time seeing like I feel like there's like 3 or 4 movies a year that are actually for kids, and then they're like, well, their parents will go take them to see Spider-Man or
Yeah.
Star Wars. And it's
Right.
like those movies aren't for kid, they're for everyone. There should
Right.
be more kids movies.
Yeah, I agree. I can agree with that.
I feel like in the 80s there are a lot more movies made for kids, but like they didn't talk down to them the way a lot of movies now do.
Yeah, the 80s did a great job of I mean treating kids like kids but without talking down to them. Yeah, what was it? The Dark Crystal, Labyrinth,
Mhm.
Gremlins. What's another one? What's The Black Cauldron? There's another one.
Right. And we were talking about the never ending story a little bit.
Never Ending Story. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. Basically, the movies people always put on a list of like traumatizing movies from the 80s, and like they're traumatizing, quote unquote. But like, I don't know. I think they're movies that just didn't it didn't talk down to kids. I'm trying to think of another better way to say it, but I think there are worse ways for a kid to be introduced to the concept of death than like the never ending story, right?
Right.
And that is a sad thing. I mean, kids are never gonna connect like the theme of Artex in Never Ending Story dies in the swamp of sadness. Atreyu is now overcome in the swamp of sadness because Artex is dying, and if he stays in this sadness, he's also going to die. And like that's an important lesson that you can't stay there when something like this happens and you're in the swamp of sadness. If you don't grieve and if you don't find a way to sort of move on, like you're there too and you need to get out. And like there are ways to do that. And anyway, but I think that's a fine way to introduce it. As I don't know, I that's how I feel.
Yeah. And like I think E.T. is one of the greatest kids movies ever made.
Yeah.
And E.T. doesn't handle kids with like kids gloves, so to speak. I don't think it gets as dark as a lot of the movies we're talking about, but E.T. still
Yeah.
dies.
Yeah, ET dies. Yeah, I mean, if ET, I think ET might have had like an original design that was much more terrifying.
Hmm.
I can't think of what it is. I just think I remember hearing that at one point. But yeah, if ET had looked scarier, people might put that in one of those lists of traumatizing kids movies from the 80s.
People still put E.T. in those lists sometimes with like when he's like all pale and dying in the
Oh
river.
yeah, 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 super
Are
sad.
are the astronauts when they arrive,
Yeah,
Steven Spielberg's using horror techniques to kind of
right.
light
Yeah,
them and
yeah, yeah.
jump scares and everything.
Yeah. And so I think there's a line between like letting your kids only watch, the Super Mario Brothers movie and letting them watch, Hereditary or, or Scream or
Right.
Friday the 13th or what have you. Like you and I think we're both in the same boat that we watched movies like Friday the 13th at an age that is way too young. I'll let other people debate whether or not that was a good idea by our parents to let us do that. I'm okay with it mostly because I like the way I turned out.
Mhm.
But I think that there's a middle ground. I think there's a good healthy middle ground that is extremely hard to do well, and that's why there aren't a lot of those movies around, is because it's very easy to make a movie just a horror movie,
Right.
or remove everything and make it completely empty. So yeah, I think movies like Return to Oz are good. They're a good touchstone to introduce kids to more serious themes and vibes, I guess,
Yeah.
scary vibe.
Right. And it's interesting because like we're talking about a lot of the kids films of the 80s, and the ones we're mentioning are all live action.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's true.
I
Yeah.
don't think
I
there
mean,
are any
the
live
Black
action
Cauldron was
kids
animated.
movies anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't wonder why that is.
And because there's a lot of great animated kids films from the Fox and the Hound, I'm pretty sure is the 80s,
Oh yeah,
and
like
The
yeah,
Great Mouse Detective.
yeah. Well, the Great Mouse Detective has scary things all on, I think. Like I mean Radigan, the villain of Great Mouse Detective himself was kind of was pretty scary.
Well,
I
he was
think he
voiced
like
by Vincent Price, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I mean that doesn't inherently make him scary, but yeah, he was
No,
voiced
but
by
that's
Vincent Price.
one of the
And
horror legends.
I think at the end, how does he die? Like he like hangs on a clock or something, right? Like doesn't he
Hmm.
gets like wrapped up in a string or a rope and like hangs and like you see his
Yeah.
body, I think, like hanging in the thing. If I'm remembering, I could be completely misremembering this, but yeah, so like there's horrifying stuff in those too.
And The Land Before Time, I think, has
Oh my God.
stuff like
Yeah.
that too.
Yeah, well when his mom dies in Land Before Time,
Hmm.
like that's oh my God. It's gut-wrenching. That was another one of my favorite movies when I was a kid too.
Oh,
But
so
like
good.
even thinking about it, like I haven't seen that movie in well over a decade. But just like the helplessness of Littlefoot, just like pushing against his dead mom and like being completely lost. Like that's a very difficult thing. And maybe when you're a kid, it's maybe good that you don't fully grasp the gravity of that situation, but it's good to see and sort of in a way that again you're not going to consciously comprehend, but like know that life goes on, right? Like
Right.
it's going to be hard at first, but eventually you're going to find friends. You're going to find a new, people you can call your family, and like you're still going to have a great life. Like death is not the end for you.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. I think that's important because, like, when I say, when we're talking about Return to Oz and I say, I think I would have liked it more had I been 12, I'm not trying to say that as like, as a bad thing.
Oh yeah,
I,
no, for sure. Yeah.
I just feel like watching it today, I'm like, I am an adult. This doesn't hit all the buttons for
Yeah.
me.
Yeah, yeah. Some of the acting is a little questionable in it, I would say. I mean, I think it's Farouza Balk's first film, and so
Which that's
understandably,
awesome.
yeah. And so I think it's her first. I could be mistaken,
It said
but yeah.
introducing in the credits.
Okay, yeah, so it is. It's like some of her lines I think are understandably a little wooden, but like otherwise, like I think it's fairly solid.
And the fact that the whole film is she's carrying it on her back,
Yeah, oh,
like
yeah,
the movie
yeah.
doesn't work without her.
No, absolutely not. She's in almost every single scene. She worked.
Exactly.
I imagine she worked her ass off through that whole
Hmm.
film. I bet it was a huge physical undertaking for her to go through and make that entire movie, of which she's in almost every single scene.
Yes, right. And it's a special effects movie, so she had
Yep.
to be perfect,
I
or
think
else they
I'd
don't get the
heard
take.
I think I'd heard a story about, I don't know what scene it was, but that like one of those stories about how like the temperature on set was way too hot and she ended up like collapsing because she was working through it, and like that sucks.
That's
And I
horrible.
think
Yeah.
yeah, it's really impressive that, that she was able to do it.
I was really happy to see her because I was like, it took me a little bit because I'm like, do I know her? What?
Is that the girl from The Craft?
And it is.
Yeah.
And this is a horror podcast. I should always think of The Craft first. But whenever I see her, I think of The Water Boy.
Oh yeah, no, I mean me too. I'll be honest, me too.
Because that movie's iconic. I know this isn't like Adam Sandler or a comedy podcast, but I love The Water Boy.
It is so good. I don't know how well it's aged. I haven't seen it in a long time, but from what I recall, like I think it probably holds up. It's really funny.
Now I kind of want to rewatch. I kind of want to do a Furusha, I don't know how to say her name. Bulk triple feature of Return to Oz, The Craft, and Waterboy.
Just see how she's progressed as an actress.
Right. And then another horror legend, Piper Laurie. She plays
Is in
Auntie M.
Oh no kidding.
Horror fans will probably best
Oh, and
recognize her
Carrie.
as, yeah, the mom in Carrie.
Yeah, okay, yeah, yeah. This was after that too.
So I thought that was super cool too. Kind of.
Hmm.
So during the time, like Piper Laurie had cemented herself in the horror genre just for that, just for Carrie alone. And
Hmm.
there's no way them making at the time, like the filmmakers would know that Furusha that she would be in The Craft.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Every time I
So
watch Return to Oz, Like child actors very often they sort of don't have the greatest later years in life. And so every time I watch Return to Oz, one of my first thoughts is always like, I hope she's doing okay. I just hope she's having a great
Yeah.
life. I love everything she's in. Everything she's in, she's phenomenal. And so I don't know. I just hope she's having a great life.
Yeah, doing what she wants to do, living comfortably. She earned it. I did enjoy those elements of Return to Oz and the visual effects and production design and like
They're
costumes
so
and
good.
makeups.
Listen,
Yeah.
every bit of it is so well thought out. Like in the 39 Wizard of Oz, everybody knows that the characters she knows in quote unquote real life before the tornado are played by the same actors who play some characters in Oz, right? And like, yeah, that's great. Good job, you did it. But like Return to Oz turns that up to 11. Like not only are several of the characters also the same character, also play characters in Oz. Like the Doctor plays the Gnome King. His assistant plays Mombi. But like the machine, like the shock therapy machine,
Mhm.
is TikTok. The attendants are the Wheelers, and like and this those are just the characters. Like there are sounds because like the wheelers, like the attendants, they push around the gurney and the gurneys squeal as they get pushed around, and those are the same sounds that the wheelers make as they roll around. So just for listeners who haven't seen it, so Princess Mombi, when the Gnome King froze all of Oz, promised her the heads of several women in the Emerald Kingdom as long as she kept the real Princess of Ozma in prison. Okay. And so Princess Mombi is effectively a headless woman who has 31 heads in glass cabinets in her castle, and she can just switch them out whenever she wants.
Yeah.
So there's 31 heads in the hospital before Dorothy goes back to Oz. She's put like the woman puts her in room 31. Like there are visual references everywhere. In the very first scene, when like you zoom in, because like in the first scene, like you're kind of zooming back from the stars, and then you go in through
Mm.
Dorothy's window. Like there's a toy, like a very small toy rocking horse on her dresser that appears later in Mombi's storage room. Like so much of this movie is so thought out and foreshadowed. Like the people who made it cared so deeply about it, and I love it so much. It's so cool.
I was really impressed with the Gnome King, especially in like the end sequence.
Hmm.
Just like the visual effects and like how
Yeah,
they
like how
brought him to life.
he turns more and more human. Like he starts off as
Yeah.
like this claymation because the Gnome King, like right, he starts out he's just like a rock monster. He's like a claymation rock monster. And then every time one of the main characters gets turned into an ornament in his little game that he's playing with them, he turns more and more human. And like it's so cool just to see this weird transition from claymation to live action, like his actual face. It's really cool. It's such a fun effect. And TikTok, I learned semi recently that TikTok has a man inside of him, right? And so that's a small space for someone to sort of hunch into and walk around in.
Mhm.
But the person, so I learned that the person inside, their legs would not fit inside of TikTok's legs. And so you know what he did? He walked upside down. He was upside down and he was walking on his hands the whole
Oh
time
my
as
God.
this little round, metallic copper robot thing. And it's more impressive when you see later in Mombi's castle, TikTok walks upstairs.
So he was doing that with his fucking hands?
Yeah.
Oh my
The dude was
God.
the dude was in this crazy cramped metal contraption walking upside down with on his hands upstairs. Incredible. Absolute legend, that man.
That is incredible. Oh my God.
So cool.
I got a question for you
Yeah.
because I'm sorry that this is going to be a spoiler. So if you haven't seen Return to Oz, it's on Disney Plus. It's a
Yep.
Disney movie. I don't think we mentioned this is a Disney movie.
Yeah, I might have mentioned it offhand on accident when I was saying that like the Disney execs wanted them to make it
Oh, right.
less horrific. But yeah, it's a Disney movie. This is the kind of crazy dark stuff Disney was producing back in the day.
Yeah, back when they were fun. Did I say that? Anyways, when the Gnome King fucking dies because he ate an egg, and
Yeah.
eggs are poison to gnomes, was that foreshadowed earlier? Because I missed
Yes.
it, if so. I totally missed
I
it. I
I
know
don't.
he didn't want
Yeah.
chickens. I
So
remember
yeah,
that.
so it's foreshadowed on a couple levels. So in the beginning, before Dorothy finds the key to Oz, she's outside looking for eggs that Bellina is the name of the chicken.
Yeah.
That Bellina, she's supposed to go out and check for Bellina's eggs.
And I
And
remember she's like,
she's like,
um,
yeah, she's like,
yeah,
you haven't been laying eggs. Like you have to start laying eggs, or else Auntie Anne says she's gonna boil you up for supper or cook you for supper.
yeah,
Right.
I
So like
remember that.
so Bellina has a character arc because like Bellina, the chicken, has a character arc. So she's struggling to lay eggs, so she can't for a while, right? And so that's kind of
Right.
foreshadowing, right? And then when Dorothy first arrives in Oz, the gnome spies who live in rocks they report back to the Gnome King,
Mhm.
and they're like I have news, like Dorothy's arrived back to Oz. And then he's like, good. And then like the gnome kind of gives like this kind of shy, sheepish look. And then he's like, well, what is it? Like, what is this other news? And she's like, well, she has a chicken with her. And he gets really up. She's like, a chicken? And he's like really upset,
I
right?
remember that part. I
Yeah.
just thought it was a joke.
Yeah, no, yeah, no, he's legitimately mad that she brought a chicken with her. And then when they first find the Wheelers, and the Wheelers chase Dorothy into this doorway where she opens it up and finds TikTok, and she's talking to the Wheelers through the door. She doesn't know who the Gnome King are. She's like, I haven't done anything to you. Like, why are you attacking me? And they're like, well, is that a stolen lunch pail you have in your hand? Because she took the lunch pail from the lunch pail tree.
Mhm.
She's like, so that's stolen property. And also, is that a chicken in there with you? Because the Gnome King doesn't allow chickens anywhere in Oz. And then nobody knows why until the moment at the end, when Bellina finally triumphantly lays an egg that falls into the Gnome King's mouth and poisons him.
Okay. So I remember all of those elements, and I still was like, huh? When
Yeah, yeah.
when the
It's
egg.
weird when you first see it, especially because like he's this giant monster. You're like, there's no way they can defeat this dude. And then an egg falls in his mouth, and they're all like, "Oh, it's poison," and they all just kind of, and he just disintegrates and dies.
And he's like, don't you know?
Yeah,
Eggs are poison to gnomes. I'm like, no, I didn't know
yeah. I
that.
saw,
Did
yes,
I miss
it's like
something?
raising your hand. It's be like, yeah, sorry, I didn't know that.
But
Yeah,
I really, I actually, at first I didn't like it, but like I thought about it a little bit. I'm like, I really like it like
yeah,
that because as someone who didn't read the books, but I'm familiar with the movie, the
yeah,
1939 movie, that's kind of how they defeat the Wicked Witch of the West.
yeah. Oh, with
Like,
water.
yeah. And
Yeah, I
when
mean,
you watch the movie,
that's
it's
a
like,
good point. Yeah.
where did that come from?
Yeah, because I do think about that sometimes, that like people who aren't familiar, I could imagine people watching this for the first time who never read the books and being like, "What in the fuck is going on in this film?" All of this stuff seems so left field and so weird. And a lot of it is, yeah, but all of it has precedent in the books. But yeah, like if you're not familiar with that, then you're just like, what? Eggs? That why? But then like you said, like the water thing in 39, like it's been a long time since I've seen it, but like I don't ever recall anyone foreshadowing or mentioning that water would kill her. And then it
Right.
just does. And it just does. And everyone's like, oh, cool. I get it. No, you don't. No, you don't. You don't get it.
Exactly.
You get it because it's like a cultural touchstone now. But I'm sure nobody got it at the time.
If they did, they were just far more accepting than audiences are
Yeah.
now.
Yeah. Yeah. They'd studied their witchcraft if they knew beforehand, I think.
That or they had no, they're like, oh, water beats a witch. Makes sense to me.
Yep. Yep, yep, yep. That's how it works.
But yeah, so I thought of that. I was like, okay, I'm cool with that choice now.
Mhm.
After I thought of that, I thought the movie needed more Toto, but that could just be because I love Toto.
Yeah, Toto's the best boy. As soon as because I watched it with my wife too, because she'd seen it before, because I watched it a few times, and she was like, Toto comes on screen and we're both just like, oh, he's just the best boy, just the best little doggo.
And when he finds Dorothy at the end, I was like, Toto.
Yeah, Toto MVP. She would have died out
Hmm.
there of exposure if not for Toto.
Right. Toto coming in clutch, just like he
Um,
does in the original film.
Hell yeah.
And I'm sure the books I haven't read. I just
Yep.
assume
Yep.
Toto is MVP of those.
Yeah, I mean he's MVP. He's MVP of anything, really.
Oh yeah,
Movie or book he's not in, Toto.
we love Toto on this podcast.
Yeah, yeah. In this podcast, we stand Toto.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm. And even if Return to Oz had no horror elements, none at all, I would still let you pick it because like Toto's in it.
Yeah, Toto. Is Toto in it? Accepted. Nice. Hell yeah.
I've got to admit though, there were parts where I was like, huh?
I mean, I can do my best to explain or talk about it.
Well, you got the egg thing out of the way,
Yeah.
and that was like a big one for me. Actually, you kind of explained a lot of like, I didn't like the Wheelers.
Yeah. Yeah, the
I thought
wheeler,
they were
they're
weird.
just they're so weird, right? They're just bizarre. And that's part of what makes them so horrifying. Just like these creepy, thin, laughing. They sometimes they make sounds that are not human. Like they bark
Mhm.
in weird ways sometimes, and like they're just lanky and they're crawling. Oh, they're
Yeah.
terrifying. But yeah, they're I mean, I can't explain them as a creature, but I have at least explained their connection to the real world counterparts, I suppose.
And that makes me appreciate them a little bit more. But when I saw them, I was like, go back to the Devo video. Like I
The
didn't
Devo video.
I didn't like
Yeah,
them.
they do kind of have a Devo or like an 80s punk vibe to them.
Yeah, and I was like, okay, I'm watching a 1980s film. It took
Yeah,
me out of it a little bit,
yeah.
but then TikTok came into play, and I'm like, okay, I'm back in.
TikTok's one of my favorite characters of all time. I love everything about TikTok. I love the mechanics of TikTok, not just literally as a machine, like from a storytelling perspective. Like the fact that he has three main sources of life, right? He's got a thinking crank,
Mhm.
an action crank, and a speaking crank. And if any one of those runs down, hijinks ensue. Like that as a concept is so ripe for like just storytelling fun for different mishaps to happen. And it does a couple times it happens in the movie and it's great. And I think they do it to great effect. I wish I had a character that had mechanics similar to that I could just plug into a situation and just have one of those things go wrong and see how it plays out.
That I like TikTok a lot. Of the I don't want to say new characters because I'm sure they're from the books,
Yeah.
but like of the characters that are like important to this movie, I think TikTok is my favorite.
Yeah, TikTok is my favorite. I love TikTok. I love everything about him.
And I also believe that Pumpkinhead, not to be confused with the 1987 Stan Winston Lance Henriksen classic film that I love. That's a
Yes,
different
so good.
Pumpkinhead.
I love that. I also love it. Yeah, it's so good. But also not to be mixed up with Jack Skellington, who is the Pumpkin King.
And
Different.
wasn't Pumpkinhead in this movie also named Jack?
Yeah. Yep.
Tim Burton's got some splaining to do.
That's right. You owe a lot of money to Disney?
Who he made a lot of money
Yeah.
through. Then I think it's fine. I think that's the corporate machine cannibalizing
Yeah,
itself.
that's probably that so it works out. You're off the
It
hook, Tim.
cancels out. Yeah.
Yeah, you're good.
I got my eye on you, Mr. Burton.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, he's got a great design too. I love the hinges of how his joints work. Like because
Yeah.
when Dorothy finds him, he's just sort of been disassembled in Princess Mombi's storage room, and he's still alive, but he just sits there for eternity because he can't really move or do anything until Dorothy assembles him. And like you get to see like how the hinges like fit together, and like they're just pieces
Right.
of wood, but like it's so ingenious and like I don't know. I'm sure that there are people who are familiar enough with woodworking that like, of course, that's a such and such joint or whatever. But I thought it was so cool, and it was so cool in fact that I actually incorporated so he had these very unique elbow joints.
Mhm.
Incorporated that when I was talking with Jason about My Neighbor Necromancer. We have a new character. His name is Backstrom, and he's a suit of armor that's just stuffed with sticks and dead leaves and things. And he's but one of his elbows is exposed, and I wanted to have that elbow joint, like just these two sticks that are stuck together like that and sort of tied with rope to keep them together. And so that's our nod in My Neighbor Necromancer issue 2 to Return to Oz, which I feel really good about.
I love that. And
Yeah.
on that note, I kind of want to start transitioning from Return to Oz into My Neighbor Necromancer because we've referenced it a couple times.
Yeah.
And listeners who might not be familiar, you might be thinking, well, what is that? Let us know. And
Yeah.
we're going to. But first, are there any other points on Return to Oz that you want to go over? Because we covered a lot, actually.
We covered quite a bit. So I would just cool little factoids. One of them,
Hell yeah.
when you first meet Princess Mombi, she has one head, and then immediately after she changes to a different head before she changes to her real head, right? The first two heads that she wears end up being her jailers at the very end when she's captured.
Oh, I didn't catch
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, so that's dope. That's some good like little revenge in there. That's nice.
Yeah.
Like that. I love the limestone pie that the Gnome King serves to them. I always thought it was delicious as a kid, and I'm mad that it doesn't exist in real life. And I also always notice when the Gnome King kind of transitions mostly into his human form, he's still got a lot of that gray makeup on. And
Yeah.
every time I watch it, I'm like, I can tell this is really bothering your eyes because like his eyes are so red and wet, like it just looks like it's bugging the shit out of his eyes, and I feel so bad for that guy.
And he probably had a healthier time than people who worked on the 1939 Wizard of
Yeah,
Oz.
yeah. Famously, I don't know if it's a myth or if it's reality that like the silver paint for the tan was toxic and made the guy really sick.
I always thought it was true. It could be myth, you
Yeah,
know.
and that the woman, apologies, I cannot remember her name. I know she's a legend in the industry, but the woman who played the Wicked Witch, like suffered severe burns, I think, from the fire trap when she
I'm pretty
did in
sure that's
Munchkinland.
true.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure that's true. Because I mean, that was the 1930s.
yeah.
There were no rules
Safety didn't exist back then.
because they didn't know. They didn't know safety. And
They
if
didn't
they
know
did,
fire was dangerous.
yeah, exactly. It was the 30s. I'm pretty sure we didn't learn that until like the 1970s at the very least.
Yeah, probably.
No, the 1980s. 70s were crazy. There's stories of like you want to hear crazy film stories, just look up the making of The Exorcist.
Okay. Oh yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Real skeletons in the swimming pool.
That's Poltergeist. So it's not even
Poltergeist.
the
Oh,
80s.
dang it, I mixed them up. No, my horror card's
Safety
been revoked.
Safety. No, no, I'm not revoking it. I'm just saying the safety wasn't invented in the 80s. It was invented I was going to say the 90s, but there's like tragic films
Maybe
instances in the 90s
maybe we
that
haven't invented safety yet. Should we invent safety?
you know, I think we should invent we should invent safety first
Oh,
before we
well,
invent anything else.
that's probably true. You know what? Let's let somebody else do it. Somebody else will figure it out.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's
maybe
not on
let's let the
us.
experts handle it. Yeah, it's not on us. We'll get around to it. I think that's all that I will say on Return to Oz. I could probably talk for hours and hours about it, but I'll cut it off here.
I'm glad you picked it because I've never seen it, and I probably would have never seen it had you not picked it.
It's buried. Like a lot of people don't know it exists. Even on Disney Plus, it is maybe reasonably like buried in it. They don't advertise it at all on there, much like a lot of the
Right.
90s cartoons and stuff. But like, yeah, it's just I don't know. It's a cult classic now. I think it's properly a cult classic. It's got a fair following now, I think.
And deservedly so, because I can definitely see the appeal, even though I don't think I'll see it again anytime soon, if I'm being
That's fair.
perfectly honest.
Yeah.
But I enjoyed a lot of elements of it. I thought it was well made. I think talking about it, my appreciation for it has grown even more.
I'll take that as a win. I can appreciate
Oh, it's definitely a win in my book.
that. Nice.
So, but I do want to make sure we talk about My Neighbor Necromancer because you have already launched the Kickstarter for what is it, issue number 2?
Issue number 2, yeah. Yeah, yeah. We've launched the Kickstarter for issue 2. If you we have a vanity URL for it. And so if you just go to necrocomic.com, it'll bring you right to the page. And we've got a lot of cool stuff. You can of course get issue 1 while you're there. We've got a lot of bundles that bring you to issue 1. But I will spoil issue 1 right now. So if you haven't read it, maybe tune out for like the next 30 seconds to a minute. But necromancer is in the name of the title, right? And so Bibbits, who is the lovable pet lizard, dies at the end of issue 1. So, but necromancer is in the name, so you know he's going to come back. And so when he comes back in issue 2, he comes back, but he's a little bit different. And Jesse's not super jazzed with how different he is. And so she sort of launches a complaint about how Bibbits is behaving, that she thought he'd be the same. And so what Cyrano does is Cyrano is the friendly necromancer, sends her on a journey to find Morta the gardener, who is supposed to help, and she learns some lessons along the way about life and acceptance and things. So it's super cool. I mentioned earlier we have new characters. Morta the gardener is one of them. She's an undead plant necromancer. Backstrom, the suit of armor stuffed with dead plant life, is her butler. That she's got kind of this fun flirtatious relationship with. We've got a lot. I mean, we got a lot of kick-ass fight scenes in it. More cool skeleton necromancy. A skeletal cat makes an appearance.
Ooh.
Yep, Gavin. I'm in love with Gavin. He might be one of my favorite characters we ever write into this story. But we're super excited about it. We've got so many cool things. We've got new t-shirts. T-shirts come in different colors, so people have options for that now.
Hell yeah.
We have a hanging map. So in every successive issue of Necromancer, Jesse will go on a journey somewhere, and there will be a page that has kind of like a map page that sort of follows her journey, kind of like what Indiana Jones does, right? When the plane flies from place to place. And so we've got maps, like collectible maps that you can get for each one. So this one's a hanging. It's on a material called jute, and so we'll have that as one of the reward tiers. And yeah, I can't wait for people to see it. I'm very excited for it.
That's awesome. I'm excited. I'm excited for it as well. Where did the idea for My Neighbor Necromancer come from?
So yeah, that's a great question. I've struggled to answer this myself. I can tell you objectively, when I came up with the idea, I was in the back seat of my friend's car and we were going to karaoke. And I don't know how it popped in there, but originally the idea for the story was going to be a young boy whose dog runs into the forest. And so he chases him into the forest and then finds out that a necromancer who lives in the woods had killed his dog. And the boy is very upset. And so the boy was going to steal the necromancy book from the guy's house. And he was going to learn necromancy to resurrect the dog, and basically fight back at this necromancer. That story sort of morphed and changed a lot. And we made the necromancer in the woods a good guy, who is battling other evil necromancer. The little boy became Jesse, the little girl. The dog became a lizard. And yeah, it sort of morphed and evolved. I found Jason Piperberg is the artist, and he contributed a lot of really great ideas and story points. So much so that he became a co-creator on the project. And so I don't know if I would say confidently that this was a direct influence, but I can't help but think that it was. But when I first came up with the idea was shortly after my uncle had died very unexpectedly. And, you know, death affects you in weird ways, and it sort of makes you think about a lot of stuff in different ways. And so I wanted to write and tell a story that didn't glorify death, but made death seem less evil. Death, like if you think of death personified, like the Grim Reaper, death is always villainized. Like it's always this bad, it's a specter, like it's a bad thing, and it's no good. There is no good to death. And I don't think that's entirely true. I think that death's job is to be hated. Like it's important that we don't like death. Like, right? Like if we need to fear it and we need to try and avoid it as much as we possibly can, because that's what drives us to make the world better. It's what drives us to make ourselves better. It's what drives us in some ways to treat other people better, to help other people, is to help them avoid this this outcome. And so I don't know. I think the human condition has a very complicated relationship with death, and that's sort of what I wanted to explore with this in a way that I think that is appropriate for kids in a way,
Yeah.
not necessarily the smallest of children, but like, and then if they read it as you get older, like you can find other things to appreciate about it. Yeah, so that's sort of, and I also wanted to make a kick-ass book about death wizards. What's wrong with that? I'm like, that's
Hell
cool.
yeah.
Yeah,
That
hell
gets a
yeah.
hell fucking yeah from me.
Hell fucking yeah. And so yeah, so we have like a lot of kick-ass ideas about, different skeleton designs and cool spells to bring the dead back to life, which is always cool, and I'm very excited. Yeah, I love it.
That's awesome. So guys listening, you can find the Kickstarter now. It's going right now. There's still time to contribute, get some awesome benefits and perks, and kickstart issue number 2 of My Neighbor Necromancer, because it's awesome and Dillon's awesome. So support
Oh,
him,
thanks.
support indie artists. And one last question before I let you go. If you found yourself returning to Oz and having to face off against the Gnome King, would you die?
I believe that I would die. First of all, how long is Dorothy in Oz? A couple days?
I think so. Yeah.
I'm a type 1 diabetic, right? And like
Oh
if
no.
I find myself in the middle of Oz for a couple days, I've got an insulin pump that will last me 3 days. So I've got some time there, but like if it's in the middle of a pump session, like it's gonna run out and then I'm dead. It's cool that she finds a lunch pail tree and she has food to bring her or my blood sugar up. That's good news. But yeah, like I don't know. I think the fact that only a chicken egg can defeat the Gnome King means that Dorothy got crazy lucky that ever
Yeah.
happened, right? I think I would have fared well at the Oz game where she has to find green ornaments and say Oz, because like green's my favorite color, and so I'm gonna gravitate towards those to begin with. Like I
Hell
got
yeah.
that in the
Yeah.
bag. But like, as soon as the Gnome King finds out that I figured it out and he gets pissed and starts attacking, like I'm done. That's it for me. I don't think I can make it.
That's fair, because the Gnome King doesn't have honor. He didn't. I felt so bad because you're like, but you said if we played the game, and he's like, fuck that shit. He
Yeah,
didn't say
fuck
that,
it,
but
fuck what I
that
said.
exactly. I was like, dude.
What about you? Would you die in this situation?
Oh, fuck yeah. Because when
Yeah,
like he's like, don't you know eggs are poison to gnomes? I was like, what the fuck?
I did not
Like,
fucking know this.
even if I got that far, there's no way that
Yeah, yeah. The gnome. Yeah, it was a due machina. It was a due ex bolina chicken, like a chicken of the gods.
the chicken of the gods.
Yeah.
I I always like to call the ending of Jurassic Park Deus Rex Machina. So this
Oh
is
yeah, that's
basically the
good.
same thing evolved.
Yeah, no, that's true. I'm with it. I agree with that.
So awesome. I had so much fun. Thank you for picking this movie because I had a really good time talking about it, and I'm glad I've seen it. One more time, where can people find you on the internet, and where can they find the Kickstarter, which I'll have links to in the show notes as well.
Yeah. So the Kickstarter again is at necrocomic.com. You can find me there as well. I'm on Kickstarter. You can message me on there. You can ask me questions about the book. I'm also on all the social medias. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Blue Sky. I'm on Instagram. I'm on there's another one. Hive. I'm even on Hive.
Oh wow.
And it's all at Dill Gilbertson. So you can find me there. Reach out, say hey, ask me questions about the book, ask me questions about horror movies, or just say hi.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining the show yet again.
Thank you so much for having me yet again. I couldn't be more happy. I was very, very thrilled that you had me on.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. Thank you, Dillon, for joining me today and for choosing Return to Oz. This episode was so much fun. And guys, if you are into indie comic books, definitely check out My Neighbor Necromancer and the Kickstarter campaign that is currently going on at the time of this episode publication. If you like this show or my other horror endeavors, then I recommend subscribing to my Patreon. I retooled it so it is only $3 a month, and you'll get exclusive content, movie reviews, and extended episodes while supporting my art and content directly. If you haven't already, subscribe to the Would You Die YouTube channel. You can find video versions of the podcast episodes, my short film Ice Cream, with more to come. If you like this show, please let me know. Leave a review and rate on Spotify or Apple or wherever you listen to this show. Also, feel free to interact with me on social media, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, wherever you're most comfortable. It may not seem like a lot, but trust me, every single like, share, comment, and follow helps this podcast grow and helps keep me going. And feel free to let me know how I'm doing. What do you guys like about the show? Areas I can improve? Guests you'd like me to have on? Monsters you want me to talk about? Let me know what you guys think. You can find the show's social media on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Would You Die Show. Also, now you can follow me on TikTok at Would You Die Podcast. Would You Die is a partner with the Three Wise Men Media, a Metro Detroit-based group of awesome guys, Kyle, Tyler, and Dillon, where they bring you professional wrestling, indie comic books, and so much more. The music you hear in the beginning and end of each episode is composed by my friend Josie Palmer. Next week is a great episode where I'm joined by a good friend of the pod to discuss something important to both of us. Until next time, I'm Austin Torres. Try not to die.